Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and the subscribe button. And if you have any opinions at all that you would like to share, make sure to leave them down in the comment section. H.E.A.T, Force Majeure. H.E.A.T are a Swedish hard rock and glam metal band formed in 2007. I first learned about them way back a few years ago when I was getting multiple requests to cover all sorts of bands from that Swedish metal scene, and I specifically remember H.E.A.T being one of my favorites with their stellar album H.E.A.T 2 released in 2020. That album actually cracked my year-end list for 2020, so if you want to check out my review of that, there will be a link in the corner if you're curious. However, we're finally here with a new H.E.A.T album, Force Majeure, and let's just dive right in. What are my thoughts on this album? Let's find out as I review it track by track. We will start with the singles, with there being 3 of them. The first being Nationwide, which immediately brings in the heat, no pun intended. Grandiose synth work, soaring riffs with the occasional lick thrown in, and this percussion is pretty solid too. I like the chorus melody on this track over everything else though. That slight rise is very appealing, plus a killer solo. This is how you do a lead-off single to get people excited. Lyrically, the song just seems to be the same old bragging, kind of motivational content that follows this Scandinavian rock scene incessantly. Not the most unique song I've ever heard, but definitely has that fire you look for. The second single and album opener, Back to the Rhythm, is a bit of a weird cut for an opener. It sure has that powerful feeling you'd expect, but is there a single bass note on this entire song? I didn't really notice any at all. It all just kind of seems like guitar and percussion, and don't get me wrong, that percussion hits hard with its sandy ruptures. But with zero bass work, it just makes the song feel empty and weak. Another gripe I have with the song is Kenny Lacremo's vocals. I just think it's how forcefully loud everything is here, but he comes off a bit quieter than I'd like. It's not major, but it only adds to the track just feeling boisterous and not really doing much else. And the third and final single, Hollywood, definitely amps up the bass from the previous single, but not with an actual bass line. But the bass drum certainly adds more volume to the song, along with the main riff being pretty crunchy and fiery, which is fitting. But this is another track that just seems to be more ostentatious, especially during the verses. One other problem I have with this song is though the percussion crashes up to the chorus, its actual impact is negligible at best. Hell, it may even be a slight drop instead of the climactic chorus. At least the solo is good though. Lyrically, it's about the vacuous, soulless life of Hollywood and how you may have glimpses of fame and stardom, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're happy. Decent track, but doesn't hit as hard as I know H.E.A.T can. Now for the rest of the tracks. Tainted Blood is another okay song, but this is a track that really feels like it's trying to puff itself up to seem bigger than it actually is. Yet again, the guitar and percussion are good. The guitar especially on this track is a real powerhouse. That bridge with the deep chanting while the solo just rips, that's fantastic there. Kenny's vocals are fine, but this chorus just feels like nothing. It doesn't soar, it doesn't explode, it's not memorable, and just chugs along at the same energy. It's a fine song, but I wanted to rave about this one more. Harder to Breathe thankfully picks up the vibe for this album. This is a good song. It has that same stickiness that I know and love H.E.A.T for. It may not be the biggest rager here, it's got a slower tempo, slightly more down vibe, but these thunderous drums just crash and bang. And I like the guitar work syncing up with the vocals, which only leads to another gorgeous solo. Dave DeLone is the real MVP on this album so far. The chorus here is a bit of an anomaly. It doesn't reach any climax, but instead it eerily drops down with Kenny singing a bit deeper, presenting a total contrast instead of just continuing the song at the same tone. That's what helps make the song memorable for me. Good stuff here. Not For Sale, unfortunately, returns to that same formula the bulk of the album so far has been following. It's not even a bad track. The ripping guitar work, solid percussion, and an intense solo yet again reigns supreme. But this is another track with a limp chorus. It's got a slight rise, but unless you really pay attention, you're not going to notice it. But honestly, the biggest flaw of this song for me is Kenny delivering one of the most underwhelming vocal efforts of any album in this scene. It's just devoid of any unique quality. He doesn't let it all out. He's mostly in a standard register for most of it. It all just adds up to an uninteresting song. One of Us is a sweeping power ballad, a track that I expected to be an easy home run for H.E.A.T, but if I'm being honest, this is probably the weakest song yet. Thankfully though, the instrumental and flow of the song is probably one of the best on the album. The piano is lush and comforting, the percussion adds that fire you'd expect from a power ballad. The problem here lies with Kenny's vocals. Hands down his worst performance on the entire album. It's so squawky and nasally, ruining any emotional value the song might have had. I just cannot take it seriously. And the main issue too is that it's inconsistently bad. He'll have flickers of good vocals only for it to be crushed by one note and kind of kill that streak. No thank you. Hard pass. Hold Your Fire is one of the better tracks on here. I like the groove and the melody of this one, more so on the verses. The guitar has a kind of old school flair to it, while the percussion bangs like no other. And Kenny also delivers one of the best vocal performances on the album. He really gets the chance to shine with some firm belts and growls. This is the kind of energy I've been dying for on the album. One thing that is a little bit weird with this track is the rhyme scheme. It's extremely clunky and doesn't make even remote sense. It's not a killer for the track, but it's just very off. Aside from that, it's a solid tune. Paramount seems to be a bit of a stylistic change-up on opening seconds. We get this marching band drum, vivacious brass work. It makes me think this is going to be a bit more anthemic and resonant, and yeah, it kind of is. The track is really fun. The opening instrumental transforms perfectly into an electrifying rock rendition. The guitar is fantastic. That drumming feels very healthy and not loud for the sake of being loud. This is also the first time since lead-off single Nationwide that I've adored the vocal melody, especially on this chorus. It's so triumphant, and Kenny feels very comfortable singing it. Yeah, this track is amazing. Definitely a highlight. Demonize is probably the most exhilarating track on the album. This is the fastest I've heard the drums crash, and I kind of just expected this to be another overly pompous song, but this one actually works, and I think that's in part due to Kenny's rougher and more raw vocal presence. He's got a bit of a growl again that I really enjoyed on Hold Your Fire. Plus, this has gotta be one of the most batshit solos on the album, and it's awesome. Yeah, I just really like this track. This is the kind of energy I've been needing. And finally, the closer, Wings of an Airplane, opens up with this intense build-up. Revving motorcycles, gritty, muffled vocals, riveting staccato guitar, a bit of a weird way to kick off a closer, but when the song comes fully into fruition, it reveals itself as a bit of an underwhelming way to finish the album. It doesn't do anything grand to end the album on a splendorous note, it just has these insanely boosted drums that take up like 70% of the mix. I'm surprised there are not fireworks going on outside. Other than that, the guitar's alright, if a bit basic, and the solo is definitely one of the more lackluster ones on the album. It's just a weak closer. Overall, man, I'm just extremely disappointed by this. I even went back to H.E.A.T 2 just in concern I wasn't going mental and thinking something suddenly changed in my music taste. But that album still hits, and it made me come to the realization that Kenny is no Eric Gronwall. Eric can really amplify his voice and make some tracks just feel utterly volcanic. But the tracks on H.E.A.T 2 also had better and more memorable melodies at the end of the day. Force Majeure just feels like a downgrade in pretty much every aspect. Inconsistent vocal effort, overly bombastic instrumentals, which are also bankrupt on bass. Like, did Jimmy J even show up for like 80% of the recording? And sure, while this album didn't have many repulsive tracks at all, it had a lot of mediocrity, and the highlights that will truly be remembered in H.E.A.T's discography could be counted on one hand at most. I'm feeling a 5.5 out of 10 on this album. Well guys, hope you enjoyed that review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.